And this is an interview with Reverend William J. Battle of the Birmingham Civil Rights Oral History Project. I'm Dr. Horace Huntley. We're presently at the Birmingham Civil Rights Institute. Today is April 22nd, 1998. Reverend Battle, I want to thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to come and sit and talk to us today about Birmingham and the movement. Let me just ask you a question. Were you born in Birmingham?
No, I was born in Union Springs, Alabama.
Union Springs, okay. And at what age did you come to Birmingham?
Practically 4.
Mm-hmm.
My people moved from Union Springs in December of the year that I was born. I was born July 1st, 1913, and they left Union Springs in December and moved to Montgomery, Alabama.
Okay.
And they stayed there until 1917. In April of 1917, they moved to Birmingham, and they first moved to Avondale down Harmon Street. Reverend J.H. Martin was the pastor of Harmon Street Baptist Church, and we lived there 2 years. And my people moved to Tillersville, right behind where Sears Warehouse used to be. And they lived there a couple of years. In 1921, December 5th, they moved to Woodlawn. And I was there from there until now.
Is that right? So Woodlawn really is the area that you probably know most about. It's like home. How many brothers and sisters did you have?
I had 3 sisters and 1 brother.
And where were you? Were you the baby?
No, I was the oldest.
You were the oldest. Oh, okay. And growing up in Woodlawn, what kind of community was it?
Well, it was the average, at that time, middle class neighborhood where everybody reared everybody else's children. And I attended Patterson School. And it was a nice thing.
What kind of occupations did people have that lived there?
Well, it was mostly people with what I call common labor jobs. And there were a few that worked at the post office and a few that were teachers. We had teachers that lived in the community that taught at Patterson School.
What do you remember about Patterson School as a student there?
Well, it was a good environment because of the fact that each student tried to do their very best. And there was a yearning for education. And we were mostly competitive, boys against girls. And it was a wholesome atmosphere.
And you left Patterson School and then went to what school?
Industrial Park.
Okay, so Patterson went from 1st through 8th grade?
Yes.
Okay. Did they have the annex at the time that you went to Park? Industrial?
Yes. We had to go to Lincoln School there as in the 9th grade. And those, we call those houses log cabin because they were very crudely put together. But it didn't dampen our yearning for learning. We made the best of the situation, and we got a good education.
Right. Now, it was still industrial high when you were there?
Oh, yeah. But now, when we left elementary school, everybody had to go to Lincoln for the 9th grade.
Right. Okay.
And that 3-story, I believe it's 3-story brick, we christened it September 1926. Our class was the first one to go into that new building, but still those houses were there to take the overflow.
Right. So Lincoln was actually a part of industrial. You said the 9th grade was actually in the Lincoln School.
That's right.
Were there First grade was an elementary school as well, or was it only?
No, it was elementary school.
Okay.
Elementary school through the ninth grade.
Through the ninth grade. Oh, okay. So kids that were there went on to the ninth grade, and everybody else from Birmingham, other schools came there to the ninth grade.
That's true.
Parker Industrial High was the only black high school in the city at the time, so it must have been a very large school. And there's been a lot of talk about it being the largest Negro school in the world. What was that like being in such a school that was so large?
Well, it was very interesting, and a lot of people don't know that when Industrial opened in September 1924, the Ku Klux Klan marched in protest of that school being there, because it was the most advanced school in architectural design, because most of the schools were crudely put together.
Mm-hmm.
And Industrial was a step, 2-3 steps above the common schools that were in Birmingham. And
So it was better than the white schools.
no, it wasn't better than white schools.
Okay, but it was really, it's the only high school at the time.
It was only that
So,
high school at that particular time.
mhm.
It really was. And you ask, what was it like? Well, it was, we accepted it and we understood why it was the largest, because it was the only one.
Mhm. Now, was that the school that was on the corner of 8th Avenue?
Yes.
The white building?
Well, the school at that time was, came all the way to 8th Avenue.
Right.
Now it's recessed, sitting back off of 8th Avenue.
Right. Yeah.
But it was right on 8th Avenue, and they had the girls' building and the boys' building, where the auto mechanics, carpentry, and those things.
What was the Klan's protest? Well, why were they protesting?
Well, I never did understand why they paraded. And they paraded in their uniforms, and seemingly, I just imagined that they didn't want anything looking that good for blacks.
Was that during the school day that they
No,
paraded?
it was before the school opened in September.
Oh, I see. It was the day before it opened.
Yeah.
I see. Were you involved in extracurricular activities at the industrial?
No, my pursuits and my interests were reading, and I was a member of the only library, black library in Birmingham. I believe it was called Booker T. Washington.
Where was it located?
It was located in the Masonic Temple building.
Okay.
And that was the only library for blacks at that particular time. And when I left school each day, that's why I went to the library. I didn't participate in none of the sports at all.
Mm-hmm.
My main interest was books.
Books, okay. Well, what did you do after high school?
After high school, I finished high school in 1930. In the period between 1930 and 1935, I drove an ice wagon, and it was more or less seasonal, because during the winter months they didn't use but a few the ice at that particular time, because the stoves, that was before electric refrigeration, and the stoves had to use ice to heat the meat.
Okay.
And I drove the ice wagon, like I said, from 1930 to 1935. And in the fall of 1935, I went to work for Cresses as a porter for $10 a week.
Mm.
And I worked there for about 13 months. And I married during the interim there, and $10 a week would not support a family.
That period, between 30 and 35, that was the height of the Depression.
It was the very height of the Depression.
What was that like?
That was something else. In 1932, that was the very low point of the Depression. They say that at one time there were 20 million people unemployed. And the statistic had that 3% of the population of America controlled 90% of the wealth. And but one thing that stands out during the Depression, it was an economic thing, but spiritually, and it was a period where that people were happy. They shared what they had. Neighbors, if your mother needed some sugar or anything, everybody pitched in. And they had a thing going for a while that they got the electricity. Most everybody's lights were cut off, but they would take a penny and put somewhere in that meter where they could still have electric current. And water at that time was $2.75 per quarter, and every 3 months. And a lot of people couldn't pay that $2.75. They paid on installment plan, $15.75. So by the time they paid that $2.75, it was time to pay it again. But that really didn't dampen the spirit. Churches were full, and everybody seemed to have been happy.
In some parts of the country, there were demonstrations of people that were unemployed, people that were on various subsistence programs. Did that happen here in Birmingham?
Not to my knowledge.
Mm-hmm. Now you went to work. At that time, you were working on the ice truck. Then you went to work for Crescent, you said.
Mm-hmm.
And at that time, that you worked for 18 months, and that was not enough money. So what did you do after that?
I walked around looking for a job, and my father was working at the Southern Railroad, and he never was unemployed. And my mother asked him about going to the master mechanic and giving me a job, but he told her that there were too many people out of work. I mean, that were working at the shop were laid off, and those people would have to be called back before they would hire anybody. But she was very, very persistent. She kept on after him until he just gave up and went to the master mechanic. And believe it or not, he told him to send me out there. And I went out there, and it's hard to believe, but they made a job for me, working at night from 10 to 6 in the morning, cleaning 5 passenger engines at night. And the very first night that I worked, when I got off at 6 o'clock the next morning, there was a fellow there to roll me. So,
To roll you, what do you mean?
well, that meant that since he was already employed, that the job should have been going to him because I had just been hired.
Right.
But the general foreman told the night foreman that he had put me on that job and that he intended for me to stay on it. The night foreman protested and said, "Mr. Wheeler, this man is already employed." And could I use the language that he used? He said, "Damn that, I put this boy on that job." And I mean from the state on that job. He walked out, and I stayed there 20 years.
Now, was this a black man that was attempting to roll you?
Yeah.
Okay, so was this a black job?
Yeah.
So, but you remained there anyway probably because of your father's reputation.
Well, it was. It was. It was that.
Yeah.
I stayed there, like I say, 20 years. And with the coming of diesels engine on the railroad, that just eliminated a lot of jobs.
What did you actually do? What was your job?
Well, it was, like I say, to begin with, I cleaned 5 passenger units. But I mean, when I say that is, if you can visualize a steam engine, okay, well, we would have a material to clean the jacket of the engine and the all the other parts.
All the moving parts in that engine.
You're right.
So that was your responsibility to keep those clean.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then with the coming of war, I was promoted to a machinist helper. Now, these jobs the job that I just mentioned, what they call common labor job. They paid 28 cents an hour, $2.24 a day. And now to give you an example, the machinist helper job, like my father, it paid 59 cents an hour, $4.88 a day. And machinists, the mechanics, were making 80 cents an hour, $6.40 a day. And of course, there were no blacks in the mechanical job. The highest paying job for blacks at that time was the machinist helper job.
So were there, there were black jobs and white jobs. Were there whites that ever worked in the capacity that blacks worked in? In black jobs that would be specified as black jobs?
Yes, but they had to break that down. There was machinist helper job that was not hard and strenuous. Well, they call that white helper's job. Well, there came a big layoff where some of the black helpers were laid off, and the white helpers who didn't have much seniority was on those quote white helper jobs, and they had to go to Washington to break that up. And from that moment on, they broke down that pattern of white helper.
When was that? Was that in the 50s or 60s?
No, that was in the 40s.
In the 40s, that's when they broke it down in the 40s. Now, you would move in effect, move up in the company as far as black workers are concerned. Did you think that your movement was adequate in terms of what you were capable of doing at that time, as far as jobs are concerned? Could you have done other jobs that you would have been qualified for and been there long enough to spend?
Oh, yes, I could have. I could have done machinist work, but you would have to have been an apprentice, and they didn't have a black apprentice. You couldn't advance to an apprentice in order to qualify for a machinist job.
Okay, so is that the way they kept you out there? Because a white person could come in at the same job as you had, but then they could be apprentices, but the black workers could not be apprentices.
No.
And at what time was that broken up?
That was broken up after
you left.
After I left. The last day I worked was Friday, October 12, 1956, and I went into the post office the next month. But what had happened, I had taken the civil service examination in 55, and I wasn't called until 1956, and it just so happened that when they called me, I had been out of work for about a month, and I stayed there until I retired in 1979 from the post office.
What did you do at the post office? What was your beginning job?
Well, it was a letters sorter, and we would get the mail, and it went through several phases before it would get to the carry. So I did that, and the thing about that was that when black clerks came in, they didn't have a choice of working out at a station. And the only way we got that is after we had been there quite some time, build up some seniority, and then we could bid out at station. And also during the Kennedy administration, they made black supervisors. Before that time, they didn't have any black supervisors. When I left there was one black who served as postmaster all the time.
Is that right? Here?
Yeah.
In Birmingham?
Mm-hmm.
Well, now you had worked at these various places, and in the mid-50s is when the movement started. You have been president, I guess, NAACP for over 20 years now.
Yes, but it was after the movement. I went to Miles College. I wasn't able to go to college after I finished high school, and after my children had gotten their education, and I enrolled with Miles as a freshman in 1961. UW Clement was a classmate of mine. He was just out of high school, and I went to 1961 to 1966, 5 years. My first year, I didn't take the 12 hours because I didn't know just exactly how I was going to fit in. But I was able to take care of myself, and of course I had to go that other extra year in order to complete my.
Were you still working at the time?
I was still working full time at the post office. I was working from 4 to 12:30, I believe it was at night. Come home and get 4 or 5 hours sleep and be ready for the 8 o'clock class.
So between 1956, when the Alabama Christian movement started, were you at all involved in that?
No, I wasn't. I didn't really get involved until after I finished mine.
Okay. Were you a voter? Were you a registered voter in the 50s?
Yes, when I was 21 years of age in 1934, I went and qualified through that system that they had,
What was that system like? Tell me a little about the system.
Okay, they would ask you questions that they made up, and they
Like, for instance, what kind of questions? Do you remember any of the questions they asked you?
I can't put my finger on any, but there was very few questions related to the Constitution. And of course, history being my special interest, I was able to answer those questions, okay. And then one registrar would look at the other one and say, well, what you think about this boy? Well, we're passing. And the poll tax at that time was $1.50. And I wasn't working, I didn't even have $1.50 with poll tax, so therefore I couldn't vote. In 1949, I went and started to find out exactly how much I had to pay. It was $19.50 that I had to pay. That was for between 1934 and 1949. And I got that receipt. It's almost ragged now, but I keep it on a keepsake. So this is what I had to pay. Actually, it was taxation without representation.
Right. So then you were not able to vote between 34 and 49. You just registered to vote, but you couldn't afford the poll tax.
That's right.
Mhm. And in '49, when was the first time that you voted?
In 49.
In '49. Okay. You remember what election that was? What was?
It was I think about Truman was elected in 1948.
Yeah, right.
But it was a city
President
election.
local election.
Yeah, local election. Right.
Now, do you remember when well, let me back up just a bit. In '54, the Brown versus Board of Education decision took place. '55 was the Montgomery Bus Boycott. '56, the Alabama Christian Movement for Human Rights was organized. And then that started demonstrations, of course in Montgomery, and then in Birmingham as well. Were you in the ministry by then?
No, I didn't get in ministry until 1965.
Okay. Did anyone in your neighborhood or your church, were they involved in the movement at all at the time? Did they have any association with Fred Charlesworth and other ministers that were involved, in the late '50s?
Well, yes, that was, of course, the Reverend Gardner was in the Alabama Christian movement.
Right, Vice President.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And of course, Charlesworth was deeply involved in that church.
Right.
Definitely involved.
Right. You were not a member of Bethel. Bethel was in North Birmingham.
That's right.
Mm-hmm. But tell me a little, in '61 when you went to Miles, in '62, Miles College students had a selective buying campaign, and of course, '63 with all the demonstrations and everything.
Mm-hmm.
What was it like being on campus at that time? You being a little bit older than many of the other students that were there. What was that experience like?
Well, it really was a unique experience, and my wife and I took part in the buying, not patronizing the downtown store.
Mm-hmm.
We would go to Atlanta twice a year. We would go there during spring break and buy the children Easter things, and then around Thanksgiving we would go there and buy the Christmas thing. We did that from 1961, well, quite a few years until they broke down the racial pattern, discriminatory pattern here. But that's exactly what we did. We participated in that boycott.
Right. Did you demonstrate at all?
No.
Never did march or any of those?
No, I didn't.
So you then finished Miles in '66.
Yeah, I finished.
In '63, of course, the March on Washington took place in August. And in September, the bombing of 16th Street Baptist Church. What do you remember about that incident?
Well, it really was a sad day, and it had its effect upon all Black people in Birmingham because of the fact that those 4 little girls' lives were lost, and the Governor Wallace, he didn't seem to have been concerned about catching people who were perpetrators. So it has its effect upon Black people because of the fact that those were children, innocent children, and couldn't worship in peace without somebody like those perpetrators had done. It really had its effect upon them.
What was the motivating force for your eventually getting involved with the NAACP?
Well, after the NAACP was outlawed, and then when it came back, well, that's when I got involved in it. And actually, I had been a member in NAACP even before they were outlawed. That was the superintendent of our Sunday school person, Carry on with me, Lord. But anyway, he was instrumental in getting memberships out in the Woodlawn area. And that's when I joined, and also Robert Alford, who pastored over here in North Birmingham. He died here several years ago. He really was my role model, you know. Did you know him personally?
No.
He was a fine dresser, and he would take the heel off the shoe, or almost off, and the shoe would kick up like that, and he wore a handkerchief up here in this pocket up here, and it would overflow, and I imitated my class picture. I dressed like him, but he and Thurston Callion were two that solicited memberships. And that's how I got started with them. And then in 1980, they elected me president of the Birmingham branch. I had been president of the Woodlawn branch, and at that particular time, the National started consolidating neighborhood branches into one branch. And each city, instead of having branches in different localities, we just had one main branch. We had 6 branches here in Birmingham, and they were consolidated. And we met at the Masonic Temple building, and we put on Freedom Farm banquets and voter registration and things like that.
Right. Were there any memorable cases that events that you remember being involved in as a result of your activity with the NAACP?
Well, there were quite a few. We had to, they supposed to have had freedom of movement as it relates to jobs. And one of the things that they did that was quite prevalent, they would hire blacks, but at the same time, they would trump up charges and dismiss them. And we had to go and talk to the employers, even though they would have some trumped up charges, but we were able to get quite a few of them back. At these different banks, like the Compass Bank, let's see, what was it before? Central Bank. We had one case in particular, the vice president, he was saying that the black woman who had been discharged said she would take a knife and just scrape her hand, you know. And that charge was so frivolous and idiotic that it just wouldn't stand up.
She would take a knife and scrape in her hand.
Yeah. But we were able to get her back, and of course, in time, she got tired of the harassment and quit. But that was the biggest thing that we had to do during that period, to keep people on the job that they were made to hire.
Now, were you still working at the time after you became president of the NAACP?
Oh, yeah.
Did that impact upon your job at all?
No.
Your activity with the NAACP?
No, it didn't, because the post office didn't follow, and try to do anything about things like that. And we had a few problems at the post office. And that was that there were no signs designating swing room, toilet, and drinking fountain. Excuse me. But it was understood that you didn't drink out of that fountain. It was understood that the toilet that blacks was in a different place. But well, we soon broke that down by just going ahead and going into those places.
What did the white employees do when you started to go into the white bathroom?
Well, they didn't show any violence, but they wouldn't come in while we were there, you know. And at one time when black new employees came to work, the foreman would get a black person to go with the black employees to show them what places they were to frequent and what they were not supposed to go. But that didn't last too long because the black that did it was ridiculed by his peers, you know, as perpetuating autonomism. So he just had to tell the phone and get somebody else, but he never could get nobody to do that. But it was subtle that they were trying to keep things as it was in the private sector.
And this was, of course, we couldn't do it by law.
No.
So they did it by custom.
Yeah, right.
Well, what time do you have?
I got 16 minutes. I got about 6 more minutes.
Okay. You need to leave here in 10 minutes still?
Well, I'm going to be the 5 minutes.
Oh, okay. Okay. Good. In your experience in Birmingham, how would you characterize Birmingham throughout the period that you lived in Woodlawn, and how blacks and whites associated with each other? Were there any association with white people, you know, in those early days? What kind of associations were there?
No, it was not any association at all, because if there were liberal white people, and there were some that were friendly, and but they were labeled as nigger lovers, and too many of them didn't want that label on them. But there were quite a few that would take those insults and deal with them, and it just seemed like that there was a spirit of Christianity among some, that they didn't let that interfere with their relationship. Even in the strictest situation, there were some white people that were friendly to blacks.
Yeah. So, although the atmosphere usually precluded that kind of association, there were some that would associate.
Yeah, right.
I'll make attempts to anyway.
That's right.
What church were you a member of?
First is Jackson Street Church, and they split in 31. That's when First Baptist came out of Jackson Street. Because I stayed there until 1938, when my wife wanted to go to First Baptist, so we joined First Baptist in 38. But Jackson Street Church was the largest church at one time in that area.
When did you go into the ministry?
1965.
65.
Yeah.
So you were at Miles at the time.
Dr. Pitts was there.
Okay. Did you know Pitts well?
Oh yeah, very well.
What kind of person was there?
Dr. Pitts was a man that was determined to moved miles farther. He was able to get men like Dr. John Monroe and other white professors that wanted to come to black school. And he had any number of good white professors, doctors, because at that time I needed some PhD, to help get that accreditation. And I remember, I forgot the lady's name. She was an alumnus of the school that UW Clemens went to. Let me see, what school was it?
Lawsuit?
Yeah.
Where did Clemens go to? Did you go to Harvard?
No, he didn't go to
Did you go
Harvard.
to Harvard?
Because John Monroe was recommending Harvard.
Right.
It was a New York school.
New York University.
No, it was New York University.
What?
It was a government school.
His daughter's at Yale now.
Yeah.
I don't know what. In fact, I'm going to go here next week. Week after next.
So you wanted to be in, oh,
So I'll find that out.
right.
Yeah. Tell me about UW. So you were classmates at UW.
Oh, he was smart from day one and a good student. He was a good mixer. And even though I was older than he, but we had a good relationship. He was, in fact, he was unusual, a young man, and a very studious student. And, well, at that time, there were still a lot of students that really got the lessons and made their marks.
Did you know Alfred Cottrell? He started the mile in '61.
What was his name?
Alfred Cottrell.
Yeah.
He was principal out at West End.
Mm-hmm.
He was at Miles as a freshman in '61.
Yeah.
And we finished Winona together.
Mm-hmm.
And that was several others that went to school over
Yeah.
there. What was the relationship between the Woodlawn black community and the police department in those early days?
Oh, it was a situation where most of the men on the police force seemed like that they got jobs where that they could beat up black people just just for no excuse at all. And there was always a white policeman, I say always, pretty much, that stood out. Now in Woodlawn, there was a policeman named Charlesworth. And I worked under his cousin. His cousin was the manager of the ice house where I worked. And I never saw the man smile. He was, it looked like hate was all over him. And I had an experience with him. A white lady accused me of stealing her pocketbook with $2 in it. She said that when I took the ice in and put it in the refrigerator in the house, well, she was paying the laundromat at that time, and the dime was on top of the box, and I got the dime and went on. So about an hour from that, when Mr. Norrell came by the wagon, I wasn't driving a wagon at that time. I was what they call a junk on because that was 1930. 1930. Okay, this superintendent got me he didn't say nothing to me. He just said, "Women, come go with me." I went on, so we went on to that house, drove around, and she called the police, and they had a substation in Woodlawn. But she called downtown when 2 policemen came from downtown, and he asked, they say, "Is this the boy you say stole your pocketbook?" She said, "Yeah, that's him." Said, "You can have that old pocketbook, but I want my $2." I didn't know what she was talking about. In a few minutes, she called her husband, and he came and he picked up a pipe. It was almost as long as from here to the door there, and it looked like it was about that big around. He picked that pipe up and started towards me, the police. And that white man stepped in front of me and told that lady, said, "Look," said, "this is one of the best boys we got. I don't believe he stole your pocketbook."
Who was this? This was the policeman?
His cousin.
Oh, his cousin.
Yeah, they were both rednecks.
Okay.
Yeah, I made mention of the fact that.
Oh, so this was the one that you worked for.
Yeah.
And he was the one that interceded.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And in other words, as far as the policeman is concerned, he could just knock my brains out. Mm-hmm. And but it really took me off my feet that he would say that about me. And but then looking back, every morning when they load the wagons up, everybody be talking about what happened last night, what they did last night, and I never had no stories to tell, And that let me know that they be watching you when you don't realize that they are. But I'm telling you the truth. I was never so near death as it was that. I mean, that man was really mad.
Yeah. Were you afraid?
Yeah, I sure was.
What were you gonna stand there? Were you gonna run, or were you just didn't know?
I really didn't know. I sure did. But that was stand out in my life as one of the miracles as far as I was concerned. And I just never knew that in him, as hateful as he was, that he was defending.
Did you ever talk about that? Did the two of you and the guy that you worked for, ever talk about that incident? Never said another word about it.
No.
I'm sure that was a real traumatic experience.
That's right. And you're speaking about the police relationship with the Black community. They all practically use the same tactics, keeping the Blacks in line, And that was the way. And then a lot of mothers and fathers would tell their boys, if you don't act right, we're gonna call Mr. Charlie Narrell. And see, the police had a thing going at that time where they would raid a house where they sold Joe Louis whiskey and give it to some of their cronies, Black cronies. And then they would keep them supplied because they got a handout. And if you want to be successful in selling shift road whiskey, they call it, you had to play ball with the police. And when they want information, they go to those fellows,
You're in debt.
Right.
So that's where they control the community, is through people that were in the community.
That's right. That's what they did. Now downtown, there was a policeman that helped patrol 4th Avenue. They called him Bulldog. He was ugly, but I'm telling you the truth. He was a friend of those much in down there on 4th Avenue. I never did know his name because I'm sure that he didn't know that they called him Bulldog, but he was more or less a catalyst and a good real person. Every once in a while you have that kind, but it wasn't too often.
He was exceptional.
He was exceptional.
All right, well, Reverend, I will, we want to cut here because we know you got to get your children. So I appreciate that. Maybe we'll be able to do this a little bit later. Get you back for another session.